The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hi, and welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet, a weekly program providing you with the latest information, resources, services, and community efforts taking place locally here in the Bronx and virtually. I'm your host, Kibin Alleyne. Coming up, a Supreme Court ruling just expanded gun rights, making it easier to access a firearm. Assemblymember Kenny Burgos joins us to discuss what this could mean for New York City. How will this affect our boroughs that are already struggling with gun violence? After that, the overturn of Roe v. Wade continues to spark conversation on the state of women's reproductive rights. A CUNY law professor joins us to discuss the effect this will have on women and young girls in America. Are reproductive rights in protected states at risk? Then the FDA orders Juul to stop selling e-cigarette devices and all 4 of their Juul pods. The New York State Quitline joins me to discuss the ban of Juul products and the effect the e-cigarette has on teens. Are e-cigarettes just as addictive as traditional cigarettes? And finally, making an effort to influence kids through basketball, founder of BU Stay True joins us to discuss his summer camp program. Can sports promote positive qualities in children? So please stick around. Open BxRx Tuesday starts now. Welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet. I'm your host, Kim Alleyne. I'd like to invite you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. After a series of mass shootings, NYC elected leaders came together to create the nation's most comprehensive gun package. However, a Supreme Court ruling just expanded gun rights, making it easier to access a firearm. Assemblymember Kenny Burgos joins us to discuss what this ruling means for New York City. Assemblymember, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Kibin. How you doing?
Now, after recently announcing your effort for stronger gun legislation, the Supreme Court has made a decision that goes against this. Can you tell us more about that ruling?
Yeah, so the Supreme Court overturned a 112-year law here in New York City and New York State in accessing a concealed carry permit. It was a devastating blow here in New York where we are plagued by gun violence, but I'm proud to say that last week we did our due diligence and hopefully fixed it.
Now, what were your initial thoughts when you heard this?
My first initial thoughts were, this would only lead to more gun violence. We've seen a rise in this violence in our city, in our state, in my own district. And I'm a big believer that, if you're going to increase access to guns, whether legally or illegally, it's unfortunately going to lead to more gun violence because that's what the numbers show us. So I had some real concerns when this decision was made. But I'm hopeful that, our new law will then protect New Yorkers going forward.
Now, I was shocked to see that this will include the 5 boroughs of New York City. What did gun laws look like previously for New York?
So previously, this concealed carry permit, where the Supreme Court ruled on it and said that it was unconstitutional, was that it required a special reason in order to access this permit. If you were a security guard or your life was in danger, and there was a litany of other reasons that you could have applied for the permit. So what we did post-ruling was, not make it a special reason because there is an argument to be made that it may go above and beyond the Second Amendment. But we changed the framework and made it, quote unquote, more constitutional because we still want to make sure it's, still a very deliberate process and very responsible in the manner in which we allow licensing of a concealed carry weapon.
Now, historically, it has always been harder to retrieve guns in larger, highly populated cities. Why do you think the Supreme Court would make this move that would combat this?
Kibin, we have undoubtedly a more conservative, some would even say more radical Supreme Court at this moment. Many who believe wholeheartedly in the Second Amendment as this blanket right to weapons. I would also argue, with the exception of Justice Sotomayor, none of them have ever lived in New York City. to know the dangers that this may cause when there's 9 million people living in a small, finite amount of space and have that kind of access to weapons. So I can't say for certain why they made this ruling, but I can say for certain that we fought back.
And how do you think this is going to affect many boroughs, in our city that are already struggling with gun violence? And a lot of people, even before this ruling, were afraid. So, how do you think this is going to affect our citizens now that this has passed?
Well, I don't think we'll see too much of a change because the decision came down from the Supreme Court, and we acted in Albany. Not mistaken, less than 10 days later, we changed the law to fit within the framework of the Supreme Court ruling. So I don't think New Yorkers will see a large difference in their daily lives. I'm very hopeful and expecting no increase in gun violence. But it was a tough decision that was made by the Supreme Court that we saw come down. But like I said, we fought back. We passed our law just less than 10 days later, and I don't think New Yorkers will see much of a difference.
And I want to talk about that a little bit. I know there was a ban in like public areas and there are certain bans. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So yeah, the new law, first of all, changed the licensing period from 5 years to 3 years. And then we made sure to put in a lot of sensitive locations where even if you have a license to carry a concealed weapon, it would still be a crime to carry a weapon in these places such as the subway, schools, public parks, federal, local, and state government buildings. And we have a very, very long list, including places like Times Square. So we were very responsible and deliberate in making sure that we protected people in designating areas that we wouldn't want to see a gun. And we don't want to see a gun, honestly, in most places in public spaces, but we're also limited by the Constitution and federal law and what we can outlaw from having a gun-free zone. But we made a very extensive list that I think New Yorkers will be happy to see.
And I also know there was an effort to bring social media into this. And I know just based on what we've seen in the past few months, social media plays a huge part just in gun violence and what we're seeing with gun violence. So can you tell us more about social media in this regard?
Well, I think there's no question that social media has been a big factor in a lot of our recent mass shootings. I mean, it's unfortunate just yesterday on Independence Day, we had a mass shooting take place in Hyland Park, Illinois. The suspected shooter had gone through YouTube, and he's had videos, indicating that he was prone to violence. We've had shooters from Buffalo to Uvalde, and every single time, the common denominator is there's some sort of social media impact here. And that's why here in New York State, we've changed the laws there as well. We've required social media companies to have a very, very strong plan and a very focused plan on addressing these kind of fringe groups and these people that have a propensity to incite violence. And we're making these social media companies, responsible. We're holding them accountable because they have a responsibility to make sure that their platforms do not lead to violence in the real world.
And I know for New York, there's either an effort or it actually was passed that people who have guns have to turn over their social media information. I think it was about 3 social media sites if they have them. Do you think that will be helpful just going forward?
I think it's helpful. I think any and everything that we can do to mitigate and prevent violence will be helpful. I would never lie to people and say that there's not a single law that can prevent violence 100% outright, right? All we can do is put our absolute best effort in mitigating this violence and use every single resource we have available. So I think, having individuals give up their social media accounts, and give up is the wrong term, but essentially just identify the social media accounts is going to be helpful. Is it going to prevent every single mass shooting? No, unfortunately not. But it absolutely will be helpful in the fight against it.
Now, the last time you were here, we talked about ghost guns in our city. Now that we've seen everything that's happened, do you think that the access to legal guns could possibly eliminate or just lower the use of ghost guns in our city?
I'm not sure what that relationship looks like, right, whether inversely or not. But like I said, I'm just a strong believer when you increase the access to guns, whether legally or illegally, you're going to have more gun violence. I mean, if you go to CDC data, you look at the states that have much more lax gun laws, states like Wyoming, Florida, Louisiana, they have much higher death by firearms per capita than New York. I tell people New York is actually the bottom 5 lowest state in regards to deaths by firearm. So it's proven right there, when you have more relaxed gun laws, you're going to have more gun violence. So I think with this change and the possible increase in legal guns, unfortunately, it can lead to a bit more gun violence. But that's why we're making sure we address from all angles to make sure it doesn't happen.
Now, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas spoke out saying New York's previous requirements prevented law-abiding citizens from exercising their Second Amendment right, and its licensing regime is unconstitutional. He's been in the news a lot for a lot of controversial things. What do you say to that?
I have a lot of comments for Justice Clarence Thomas, but in regards to the question, I wholeheartedly agree with the terminology used, regime. As lawmakers in New York, our first and foremost priority is to keep New Yorkers safe. We have a constitutional right in the Second Amendment to bear arms, but I don't believe that to be a blanket right where people have access to, military-grade weapons or weapons on demand. I believe even the founding fathers would agree that there have to be other responsibilities in place. The founding fathers didn't see a city of 9 million people right here cramped into a small space. The founding fathers didn't see these high-grade, high impact assault weapons that we have today. So I think we have to keep our laws with the modern times and protect people. We can still give them their right to bear arms, but it has to be done in a very responsible manner that does not put other people's lives at risk.
And although in New York City, we did make efforts to protect our citizens, what message does it send to our entire country, who's already facing a lot of issues with gun violence? And as you mentioned, we just saw one recently during July 4th.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you're saying what message is it sending in regards to the Supreme Court ruling or with our laws?
What message is it sending to our country that they would be a little bit more relaxed when it comes to gun laws, even though we're facing a lot of mass shootings?
I think it shows the Supreme Court is out of touch. I think on the wake of yet another mass shooting just yesterday, I think since the Supreme Court ruling, we've had probably over a dozen mass shootings. And if you can't take that into account, if you can't see through that lens that this decision is irresponsible, then I don't know what gives. It sends the wrong message to America. America being the most armed country probably in history, and yet we're not the safest. Mass shootings is almost part of our culture, unfortunately. And I think the Supreme Court's decision will have ramifications for years.
Now, how can people stay up to date with you? You're always talking about things that are happening, and you're always making an effort to protect New York City and the Bronx. How can people stay up to date with you?
Certainly, social media is always probably the easiest form of access. All my social media accounts are at Kenny Burgos NY. That's for Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. My office is over here in Soundview, 1163 Manor Avenue. And you can go on my website too at nyassembly.gov. So stay in touch.
All right, Assembly member, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Kibin. I appreciate it. Take care.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday. Welcome back. The Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade sparked national conversation on the state of women's reproductive rights. Law professor for CUNY Law, Natalie Gomez-Velez, joins us to discuss the effects this ban will have on women and young girls throughout America. Professor, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
So as I mentioned, we all know, about the decision the Supreme Court came up with. Can you explain what that means for our country?
So, yeah, the Supreme Court's decision in the Dobbs case overturns Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey. And those cases, more than 50 years ago, Roe v. Wade established a fundamental right to abortion that was based on a liberty interest. And Casey, Planned Parenthood v. Casey, reaffirmed that right about 30 years ago, establishing again a fundamental right under the United States Constitution's 14th Amendment Due Process Clause. And when we say a fundamental right, that means across the United States, the governments could not limit access to abortion. Removing that as a fundamental right means that now individual states can impose restrictions that are even greater than some of the restrictions that had already been in place under the balancing in Roe and Casey. And so what we're seeing now is on a national level, different states are imposing different abortion laws. So, for example, in New York State, abortion remains legal and protected under state law. But in many states across the country, there are bans on abortion, including criminalization, including bans across the board all the way to the very, very beginning of a pregnancy. Some don't even have exceptions for rape and incest. So we have different requirements and restrictions on women's and pregnant people's access to abortion across the states.
Now, as you mentioned, some bans have already gone into effect in several states. What are the penalties? And as you mentioned, it's criminalized. So, what could people be facing if they are looking into abortion?
Now, there's a real range, right? So it's different states have different types of bans. Some of the bans existed. Oh, thank you. That's a great map, right? There are places where abortion remains legal, but there may be legislation pending that might impose restrictions. There are states where there are absolute bans on abortion, including, some of the states you mentioned here where there are criminal penalties, including felonies for the providers. Usually they're aimed at doctors and providers or those who assist abortion services, although there are some threats for penalties against women. And then there are other restrictions, different restrictions in different states. Some restrict abortions at 6 weeks, some at 14 weeks, some at 22 weeks. So there's a real range across state by state, and it creates a great deal of confusion, and it makes access to what is essential, fundamental health care, reproductive care, difficult for many women across the country and confusing, right? And again, I want to say it over and over again. We're here in the Bronx. We're here in New York. Abortion remains legal in New York because under state law, there's a 2019 law that expanded abortion access. Just recently, the legislature in 2022 is trying to provide additional protections and even working to enshrine reproductive rights in the state constitution. But that's New York. People in other states are going to be facing different restrictions.
Right. And in some states, the consequences are very, very harsh. According to ABC News, in Missouri, one could face up to 20 years of imprisonment. And in Texas, it could be something like 99 years plus a fine. How do they come up with these numbers? And why are we seeing such aggressive and harsh penalties for this?
You really have to ask the legislatures. It really boggles the mind that you would have these kinds of penalties related to, again, what is essential reproductive health care. Now, there are those who say, they have religious views of abortion, but that is not something for the states to be regulating. And you see in some of these states, and I see you're pointing out Missouri, you're pointing out Texas. Texas even has a bounty hunter provision that has folks kind of getting access to $10,000 rewards for basically ratting out anybody who assists in someone obtaining an abortion. And, it really is harsh. It's about controlling women. It's theocratic. It really has no place. But several states, now that they're free to do so, and there's no restriction under federal constitutional law, will be doing that unless and until people vote out those legislators and ask for something different.
Now, I also want to touch on the fact that in some of these states, of course, it's going to affect the woman looking for it, but it can even affect, a friend or a doctor and possibly even a driver. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for example, in Texas and I believe in Oklahoma, they also passed a copycat law that imposes penalties and allows for like a bounty hunter structure for those who report on anybody who assists in obtaining abortion. And that could be the doctor or provider. It could be a friend who helps you out. It could be a counselor. It could be even someone, a driver. And they could be subject to what they're calling $10,000 fines, penalties associated with helping to someone to access abortion. And the reason for that is really a chilling effect. It's to stop people from helping out. Now, the other states that are more protective are looking for ways to really limit those provisions and keep them within the states. Those raise federal constitutional issues that I think are really underdeveloped, and we're going to see what happens across different states when women who are seeking access to reproductive care, to abortion in particular, but to other abortion-related care involving miscarriages, et cetera, try to cross state lines to get care, whether or not some of those really harsh provisions can be limited. So it's a complex web of different laws in different states that are threatening different kinds of penalties. And we'll see, how it plays out. I mean, there's all kinds of litigation going on even now.
Now, as you mentioned, in many of the states where abortion is banned, there is no exception for rape or incest. Do you know if these states have addressed or even adjusted the consequences of those crimes if these women and girls, or, and even pregnant people have to live through or go through with a pregnancy?
I don't know of any provisions that really take into account the human impact. Can you imagine of a forced birth where the pregnancy results from rape or incest? The emotional toll in addition to the medical and just physical everything. And I have not heard of states doing anything really to help women who are in this situation, the children that are born in this kind of situation, the economics, the child, any of that. I really don't see those same legislators, legislatures doing anything really to address what these restrictions will do in forcing birth in circumstances that are extraordinarily difficult and will have impacts that go way beyond just when that forced birth happens, but well beyond that, into impacting the lives of those women and their families and loved ones.
And I think that's really unfortunate. And I feel like more people should look into that because I think that, 99 years of even looking into an abortion versus, the consequences somebody has to deal with, I definitely think it needs to be addressed. But thank you so much for sharing that. Now, I want to talk about period tracking apps because it's been on the news a lot lately. Several women are just concerned about their privacy and the release of sensitive information. Can you tell us more about this?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's been a broader conversation about all of our devices, right? We're all hooked on our devices. They help us with all kinds of things, but issues around privacy and access, right? The sort of the aggregation of data, the fact that, things that you're using in social media and other places on your computers, on your laptop, on your phone for free are not really free because one of the things that often goes on without our even knowing it is that our data and our information, including our locations, including everything that we share, right? If we share it, quote unquote, voluntarily, there are third parties, including private corporations and governments that can not only collect that data, but share it, aggregate it, et cetera. And one of the concerns that has come up with period tracking apps and other kinds of apps that track your cycle is that might be used in some of these states that are imposing very severe penalties on abortion access or anything related to abortion access that would use that as evidence in some way, when they're trying to prosecute those who might assist in terminating a pregnancy. And it's really, when you think about it, it goes so far beyond just those seeking abortion in the narrow set of circumstances that many people think about it. I mean, this is going to have implications for women who face all kinds of medical issues, miscarriage, ectopic pregnancies, everything else. And if there's surveillance going on that's there to serve these penalties, it really can have terrible impacts for women. And so that's an area where you've got to watch it. There isn't the regulation necessarily to protect you. So be careful, especially if you're in one of these states that has these very restrictive and punitive bans.
Now, should people be worried using these apps when they say, because sometimes they do tell you, and we often don't read those policies, but they'll say that they may use your personal information to comply with applicable laws, lawful requests, and legal process, such as to respond to subpoenas or requests from the government. And sometimes they'll say that they have a legal obligation. I know a lot of people don't understand what that means, but should they be worried if they see that in an app that they're using?
Yes, better not to share any sensitive information in any app that you have if you are not completely sure that it's secure. And I'm telling you, we can't be completely sure these days that it's secure because I don't know about you, but a lot of people, they say in order to use this, you've got to kind of check off on our privacy policy. Often those privacy policies say we can share, and we do share this information in certain places. And that includes there's often a legal obligation. If there's a criminal penalty or a criminal, restriction on some kind of action, and they seek to use that information, you're not necessarily guaranteed. And I don't think the law has caught up with the ability to use that sensitive data for these kinds of things. And so I would say, yeah, you should be careful in terms of using, those kinds of apps and other mechanisms in your computer and your phone, et cetera, that could be accessed by third parties.
Now, I want to talk about the LGBTQ community for a little bit. Can you just explain how does abortion rights affects this community and how they're linked?
Yeah, there's a link. So when we talked about the fundamental right to abortion, that right was situated in the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution that says no state shall deny life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And that liberty interest includes bodily autonomy, but under law, under precedents that include and that are related to Roe and Casey that we're talking about, that included substantive due process rights to contraceptive, to have contraceptions, to intimate personal relations, intimate sexual relations, forming your family, marriage, interracial marriage, and same-sex marriage, all the protections of all of those personal rights, those really close to your heart personal rights, spring from substantive due process, right? Including same-sex marriage, including, those kinds of intimate relationships where the government under the Constitution so far cannot tread, right? And so with overturning Roe v. Wade, even though Justice Alito in the majority opinion says, oh, this is limited to just abortion rights, that's not how the law works. And Justice Thomas in a concurrence was pretty overt in saying that his goal, and maybe others, and they're not saying it yet, is to really, pare down and roll back a whole series of protections, liberty interests, bodily autonomy interests, personal and family interest protections under the rubric of substantive due process in the 14th Amendment to the Constitution.
Now, there's so much to learn about this. How can people stay knowledgeable about the abortion laws in their state?
It's a great question. There are a number of organizations that track what is going on in the states. So there are legal organizations that have been engaged because it's really a patchwork right now, right? And so there are some states where, say, a dormant law came into effect or a trigger law came into effect, but then there's a legal challenge. So organizations like the Center for Reproductive Rights, like If, When, How, Lawyers for Reproductive Justice, like the ACLU Reproductive Freedom Project, track the laws. The other organizations also track kind of the policy and facts, right? People really don't understand the scope of what's affected when we're talking about abortion rights, right? So many women, right, are, it's women with children already. It's women with families. It's people from all kinds of religious backgrounds who really seek access to abortion and other reproductive care. But I would say you can track those organizations that are really following closely what's going on state by state. I'm going to say it again. In New York, abortion remains legal because under state law, abortion access is legal. But yes, if you're going traveling, if you're going to think about moving to another state, you want to take a look and see what's going on, especially if you are a woman, it's mostly young women, who may need access to care. You want to sort of keep track of where that stands in other states across the country.
All right, Professor, thank you so much for bringing us information.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday. Welcome back. The U.S. FDA announced that e-cigarette company Juul must stop selling all Juul devices and products from U.S. markets. According to the FDA, this was an effort to protect public health. Dr. Andy Hyland and Dr. Sara Siddiqui of New York State Smokers Quitline joined me to discuss the ban on Juul and the effect the e-cigarette has on teens in America. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Now, Dr. Hyland, can you explain what e-cigarettes are and what the act of vaping is?
Sure. So e-cigarettes, the thing that makes them different than conventional smoking is that they don't burn tobacco. A battery heats up a liquid, and that turns the nicotine and some other things into a gas, and that's what you breathe in. So it's that nicotine goes to the lungs through that process. Cigarettes burn and create lots of chemicals in doing that, and that's where most of the health risks come from. That's why we know cigarettes are so dangerous. It's really that burning process.
And is vaping basically the use of an e-cigarette?
Yes, yeah, vaping is e-cigarette users, vapors, they're synonymous. There are different terms that are used, but Juul, vaping, e-cigarettes in the colloquial terms are interchangeable by many.
Got it. And now, Dr. Siddiqui, do you feel that this is a win for public health, the banning of Juul products?
I mean, I think that it is a message to children that perhaps Juul and vaping is not considered, even though it may be considered safer than smoking combustible cigarettes, it may not be safe. And although the data is still not there, we do encourage that children not start vaping, and that's why it is a win for public health.
Now, they're only banning the brand Juul. Will this make other less popular brands more popular, or do you see an increase in their sales?
You know, children, I mean, we're talking about children and vaping also, and we are concerned that just because Juul has been removed or being suggested to be removed, this will impact and will increase other forms of flavored vaping, especially towards the kids.
Now, Dr. Hyland, how does an e-cigarette differ from a regular cigarette?
Yeah, so that those e-cigarettes, they use a battery, they heat up that vapor, and it's that vaporized nicotine that the user gets. So e-cigarettes are also characterized by their flavors and the different device types. Cigarettes are sort of like they're all kind of the same, in a very broad sense, and they've been that way for a long time. But the vaping products today are evolving. The packaging is different. You saw those, the USB device type thing. The one thing that makes Juul that maybe best known for is that they figured out the chemistry better than the other companies. The way their product chemistry has really changed the way these products are, and they deliver nicotine more effectively. And some people argue that was the reason why the youth vaping increased at the time that it did, because of a better product, a better nicotine delivery system, which for kids is a bad idea. Nobody thinks kids vaping or using any nicotine product is a good idea. But for adult cigarette smokers, it's a more complex argument that's there, which we can touch on.
And to follow that, are they just as addictive as regular cigarettes?
Yeah, so it's the nicotine is the addictive substance that's there, and what we're seeing now in the most recent years is that the fraction of kids that are vaping are hooked. Increasing number of them. So kids vaping daily 5 years ago didn't happen, whereas today it's approaching 40 to 50% of kids that are vaping every day. Which is really dramatic, and I think speak to the issue of addiction. Is addiction itself a health risk? Even if the product itself may have less toxins than cigarettes, it's still not as clean as clean air, and that addiction brings people back to continual use of those products. And with young people, we just don't know what the future holds for them.
Now, Dr.
And I think it's
Siddiqui,
important. Yeah, I
you can
think it's really
continue.
important to also remember that children's brains are developing still continuously until about 21 or 25. And so starting these habits, something that can be so addictive, it can be just much harder to quit later on. And these kids don't realize that it's going to be addicting when they start something like this. And so the nicotine, just as Dr. Hyland said, the nicotine is so much faster absorbed and faster getting to the brain, and it's much quicker addiction potential. And unfortunately, the kids don't realize that that's what's happening until they're well in it, and it's very unfortunate for them. And as being part of the Quitline, that's what we see, and that's what we're helping with, because it's an addiction.
So we're seeing
Hard.
a lot of these negative consequences. Why do you think the FDA has ignored Juul and the rise of e-cigarettes for so long?
Well, I can speak to that. The news today or recently about Juul is really a part of a long ongoing process where all vaping products had to essentially apply to be allowed to be continued to be sold. They received 6 million product applications, and the FDA has already acted on almost all of them, millions of them, and some of the earlier Juul products, some of the flavored Juul products have already been denied. So of those millions of applications, any of the flavored products have been denied. It's really the products that have made it through. There's only about 20 of them, and they're tobacco flavored sorts of products, products that are thought to have low appeal to young people, but still to make them available to adult cigarette smokers that might be looking for an alternative that's there. So most recently, Juul had their tobacco and menthol mint product applications come up for review, and those were denied based on some questions about, I guess, the toxicology data. I haven't seen the reports, but that's what the press materials suggest, that there was some concerns or some conflicting information about some of the toxicology information. So it really is part of a long ongoing process, which is made complicated because of the way the FDA has acquired regulatory authority over tobacco products. Even if you think about FDA, they regulate drugs and drug delivery devices, a safe and effective standard, like our vaccines that we have for COVID. But when it comes to tobacco products, it's a whole different standard. Safe and effective don't really make sense there. So it's part of that long ongoing process over about the last 10 years that the FDA has acquired the regulatory authority and are beginning to implement some of it.
Now, why?
And I just like to add, I just wanted to add that the FDA, I don't know if the FDA really ignored as much as they weren't involved, as Dr. Hyland said, in the regulatory process. And then it became much bigger than we all thought it would. So I think that was the issue.
Now, I think a question many people find themselves asking is, why has this form of smoking just become so popular amongst young people and teens? And doctor, can you just tell me why you think that may have happened?
I mean, we have, if I deal with adolescents all the time, they're a great group of kids. This is the age group. I like all ages, but the toddlers and adolescents are my favorites. And that's because their frontal part of the brain is not developed yet. They're going to try new things. They're going to try different things. And if you say no to them enough, they might even, want to try it even more. And I think one of the reasons why vaping became so prevalent in the teens is because, and Juul marketed it or tried to kind of make it like glorious, kind of, they made it colorful, they made the flavors very wonderful sounding, and it kind of fit in the palm of your hand, and you could do it anywhere, and we didn't really know that it was bad for you at that time when it first came out. So it was easy to get, it looked good, it was, thought of as safe, which now we know that it just because it's safer, it's not safe. But that's, I think, the initial part of it. And then it kind of just, exploded from there.
Now, you mentioned like safer does not mean safe. Is there a safe option for smoking? Like, I know everyone's always looking for that, but does it exist?
No.
So I think being on the Quitline, right? Being on the Quitline, we know that, the best thing is to not smoke and not vape. But we do understand that it's addicting. And that's why we're, developed such a supportive atmosphere that we know that it's hard to quit, it's hard to stop, and it is very addicting. And that's part of the Quitline, is that it's no judgment here. We're providing support and things that are needed to help people to get on a healthier track.
Now, Dr. Hyland, I think that a major downfall in this entire situation is the lack of health education surrounding all smoking products. What do you feel needs to happen, or what do you feel needs to be prioritized so that kids, or just even adults, learn a little bit more about smoking in general?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's been more than 50 years since the Surgeon General's report came out and said that smoking was the cause of lung cancer. We still have 480,000 deaths in the U.S. every year attributable to cigarette smoking. And the products are just exploding, all different kinds of products. The slide that was showed the array of products that are people using. I think first and foremost is that cigarette smoking is incredibly harmful. And anything we can do to reduce cigarette smoking will yield tremendous benefits. And then the second component is looking at some of that marketing and how these products are promoted. And when it comes to vaping, there's even the FDA authorizations for the products that they have allowed. They've come with conditions that the products are not appealing to young people, that they're not advertised to young people, that former cigarette smokers aren't coming back to use these products. And so those kind of principles, where if there is a truly lower exposure product that cigarette smokers who are unable or unwilling to quit can be on the market, that it's done in a way that doesn't attract kids. And that's the needle that the FDA is trying to thread. But first and foremost, cigarette smoking is incredibly harmful. The New York State Smokers Quitline is a free resource. Everyone in New York, 1-866-NY-QUITS. You can go to the website, you can Google us, and there's strategies and tips and free nicotine replacement therapy and FDA-approved medication to help people quit.
All right. Thank you both so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday. Welcome back. One man is using basketball to positively influence Bronx children. Andrew Curiel, founder of BU Stay True, joins us to discuss his program and summer camp. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. Appreciate it.
Now, can you tell me about your program, BU Stay True?
Yeah, absolutely. So BU Stay True is a nonprofit program that we've created here in the Bronx to benefit boys and girls ages 6 to 14 and provide them with low-cost basketball camps. I initially started this because when I was growing up in the Bronx, my mother couldn't afford to put me in the best AAU programs or best camps throughout the summer. So I wanted to create an alternative for kids to just have fun and be themselves. Throughout the time at the camp, what we do is we teach kids how to be themselves, but we also promote character building and leadership, not to be a follower, those type of things directly from the coaches. And the way that we do it is through basketball.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about the origin of this camp? How did it begin?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I'm at my alma mater. I'm at the College of Mount St. Vincent, which is located in the top northwest section of Riverdale. And for me, it actually started right here as well, in one of the dorms called Mastronardi Hall. I was living with my roommate, Nico Zeno, and he was on the game. I was on Instagram, and I literally saw one of my friends starting up a step camp. And I was like, Nico, we could do this. Like, we could actually start a camp because we're NCAA athletes. Like, we play basketball in a collegiate level. So for us, it was just about getting our name out there, creating a mission, creating a brand. And I was literally in that room just creating things. When we initially came up with the name, we were supposed to be Summer Fun Basketball Clinic. And I thank God that we didn't end up going with that. We changed over to BU Stay True because of my pastor. When I was growing up, he was always motivating me to be myself. So he would always say, who are you? Be you, be Drew. And it kind of rang with me. And I was like, all right, BU Stay True. That's how we're going to do it.
Now, was it difficult or challenging? I think that, so many people have great ideas, but a lot of people don't get to see that actually come to fruition. So was it challenging to get this off the ground?
Not as much challenging because I just finished up my freshman year of college. So I had a lot of time from like May 18th to the first day of camp, which was like July 12th. I had 2 months to just be at home and just work on this, create it, develop the website, develop the t-shirt sales. But what was so cool, and I give a lot of credit to Mount St. Vincent, was I was learning everything in my business classes, and I was directly applying it to the creation of BU Stay True. I was in principles of marketing. I was in principles of management. And I was trying to take those lessons I was learning and use them in every day throughout BU Stay True. So creating the logo, creating the t-shirts, learning about profit and loss, learning about fundraising, how to benefit the kids with the funds that we raise to buy trophies, certificates, things like that. So I wouldn't say it was too hard because I had the support of Nico and I. And we were so driven that since we were home, not working or doing anything, we had all this time to dedicate to this new mission that we were about to build.
Now, what led you on the path of positively influencing and promoting character building in children?
I've been so fortunate throughout my time growing up in the Bronx. I'm a Bronx native. I'm 26 years old. I grew up in Parkchester. Now I reside in Co-op City with my mom. And so many people were willing to help me along the way, from my pastor to coaches to friends to other family members, to make sure I was on a direct path to be successful. And when I look back at my life, if it wasn't for those certain type of people, I don't know where I would be. And the one quality that are in all of those people is leadership. And I know that's such a big thing that we're trying to develop into our young people and into grown adults as well. Continue to be a leader in whatever place that you take up, whether it's school, a team, a workplace. And that's what we want to continue to build into our people, because we know, being from the Bronx, we're so strong. We can do a lot. But with those leadership skills, we're just hoping that these kids learn it, apply it to their lives, and hopefully become leaders of their own to move forward.
Now, I think it's really cool that you chose a sport to kind of focus on, as opposed to, and these summer camps are great, but they kind of generally just focus on, general summer activities. Why did you choose basketball as your way to connect to these kids?
It's authentic. It's authentic. It's how I develop friendships. It's how I learned about different people throughout the community. And I knew in a basketball setting, it's so easy to make friends because you have to work with other people. In order to pass a ball, you need a partner. In order to get your rebound after a shot, you need someone to rebound for you. And in order to learn leadership skills, you got to be among other leaders, whether they're coaches or other students there as well. So basketball was always natural for me. And I knew it's a natural medium to connect with kids, because if we're having fun, kids are going to be inclined to learn without them even really knowing. So the really cool part is seeing all the coaches get involved, seeing the kids learn, and then also seeing the kids apply that to the younger kids at camp. And right there, over the span of 2 days, we're already seeing the leadership skills being built in those children.
Now, I think for a lot of people, they don't necessarily think of sports as a way, for character building. They usually think it's just like an activity to keep you physical, but how does it actually support your growth and, how does it promote positive qualities in children?
Yeah, I think from the physical aspect directly is you're moving, right? You're running up and down that court, you're shooting, you're doing different layups. And what I like about basketball specifically is that it's a stop and go sport. So it's like you could be going for 4 straight minutes, but then you have to have a timeout and you have to reset and you have to refocus. I love the substitution aspect. You can sub in and out whenever you want. So learning a lot of different things, and I just thought about this one as well, even ego, right? We may think we're the best player, but sometimes the best player needs a break to get even better, to get that rest and to come back stronger. So it teaches kids a lot. It also teaches kids about sharing as well. Hey, you may not have to take every shot. Share the ball with someone who may be looking for a shot, but might be a little scared to do it. I think it also teaches children how to just be confident as well. Hey, you have worked on something for an entire day. Here's the second day of camp. Time to show out, show everything that you learned. Why not try it? And what I like about it as well is our kids and our coaches, we give that confidence to our kids too through sports. They can see the immediate kind of like lesson when they learn something, they shoot a basket and they're like, wow, what you just taught me just worked. So I think that's another positive aspect as well through the basketball medium.
Now, I think it's really cool that it's not just a learning opportunity for children. You also give opportunities to college students, and they can become volunteers. Can you tell me more about this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's become something kind of natural throughout my time here at Mount St. Vincent. I was very fortunate this past year to have 2 student interns within the Office of Admission where I work at now, one in the fall and one in the spring. And another student reached out to me. She was like, hey, I want to intern with BU Stay True. I heard about you through Professor Rosenberg, who was my professor for marketing. And I was like, I never thought about it, but let's try it. And what was so funny was she told me straight off the bat that she wants to learn about the business side of nonprofits, how we raise money, and also help the kids through the money that we raise and what else goes into the nonprofit work. So the cool aspect about that is she's gaining 3 credits because of this. And my past interns as well, they gained 3 credits. So instead of sitting in a class, whether it's an elective or core class, they're gaining credit through experience. And that's the most important thing, I'm sure you know as well. Gaining that experience during your college years so that when you go apply for these jobs, they see, all right, you don't just have a degree, but you have experience in this field. Now we can throw you into the fire and see how you do. Also, the volunteer aspect has been great. We have 3 other students. So we have Liana, Joseph, and Neo, which are current freshmen and sophomores. To a degree, I've recruited them here to the College of Mount St. Vincent. So I've seen their journey. I've spoke with their parents. I know their families. And I've seen each of them here at Mount St. Vincent thrive, whether it's a sport, a club, or an international group. It's been great to see them thrive and really live the mission of BU Stay True. So when I asked them, it was kind of like a natural connection. They were so down to be able to help and volunteer.
Now, can you explain the importance of having this program available to kids in the Bronx?
Yeah, super. We see programs all the time within New York City or New York State. A lot of our kids in the Bronx are leaving the Bronx because they have to go to quote unquote better programs upstate or in Long Island or anywhere else. I want to create an equitable type of environment for our kids to also experience basketball in a positive sense, but also experience that at a very lower cost sense in comparison to other programs. Like I said, we used to be free, but then we had to change our mindset and develop a cost for the people to be a part because we wanted to get them better things. We wanted to get them trophies. We wanted to get them certificates, better T-shirts. This is our first year having dry fit T-shirts in comparison to cotton, having better signage, things like this. And what I like about it as well is that although we have raised our price and our cost, people have still stayed true to the mission and still have stayed supporting us. Ultimately, all of our coaches, including myself and Nico, we live this mission every day of our lives, being us, staying true to who we are. And I think that's the bigger mission of what BU Stay True is. We're just using basketball as a medium, but ultimately we want to motivate everyone from parents to kids to adults to be themselves in every space that they take up and to stay true to who they are.
Now, based on the program and the idea that it's sports, although it's open to everyone, I know that you probably get a lot of young boys and young men joining. How does that influence the work you do, especially being, a young male from the Bronx?
Yeah, huge. I was on another podcast earlier this year called 40 Central out in East Tremont, and we talked about it. Like, we are the example for our youth. So we have to be in these spaces, having these conversations, but also setting the example, authentically being ourselves, so that others, young boys, young men, see us and be like, oh snap, Drew's doing that, or oh snap, James is doing that. I can do that too. I never want to brag about my accomplishments. I've come up from all the work that I've done, but I want to show other people too. It's okay to work hard. It's okay to have a payoff. But most importantly, it's okay to be yourself throughout the journey. You shouldn't compromise your authenticity for anyone or any place. But just being yourself is such a strong kind of like avenue to have, because it can help you in all the places that you take up, whether it may be a basketball court, a job, or even school.
Now, this sounds like a really amazing program. What are the requirements for joining?
Good question. Really, when I think about it, there's no just, I want kids to have fun throughout the summer. I know they may be off from school, or they may be staying home while parents are going to work, or they may be in a summer program where it's just school based, but come out for a fun filled weekend of hoops, learning from college athletes, former pro athletes as well, and also just getting a good workout in as well. We've been cooped up for the last couple of years, and I just want students to come out to College of Mount St. Vincent, see this beautiful campus that we have right here in the Bronx, right on the Hudson River. And I also want them to experience a fun day of basketball, learning from athletes, learning from coaches that have played their entire lives and want to give back. Genuinely, all of my coaches want to give back. None of us are getting paid. We just want to have a good time and hang out with kids playing basketball.
Now, how can people get in contact with you and learn more about the program?
Absolutely. So 100% visit us on our website, www.bustaytrueprogram.com. Also connect with us on Instagram at bustaytrue_. If you want to get in contact with me, my Instagram is Drewski with 1 underscore.
All right, Andrew, thank you so much for joining me.
No worries. Thank you so much.
All right, that's all for our show today. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Kibin, wishing you and your safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.